You been reading my diary?
No.
Why not? I would.
They lived in Islington.
Isn't that quite fashionable?
Not then, dear.
An apartment?
Hardly. It was a cupboard.
All right.
Smashing.
Welcome to Kermode Uncut. It's 50 years ago since the death of Joe Orton, the brilliant playwright, who was killed by his lover, Kenneth Halliwell. And to mark this anniversary, the BFI South Bank are doing a season called Joe Orton, Obscenities in Suburbia. Loads of interesting screenings. They've got a screening of a BBC Theatre Night production from 1987 of What the Butler Saw, a 1970 version of Loot with Richard Attenborough, Lee Remick and Dick Emery, and the Douglas Hickox entertaining Mr. Sloane with Beryl Reid. But the centre of the season pretty much is that Prick Up Your Ears is coming back to our screens. Now many of you will have seen Prick Up Your Ears, and it's great that it's coming back to cinema screens because it's a really terrific movie. It's based on the biography by John Lahr, which is obviously based on Orton's own diaries, and there is a screenplay by Alan Bennett which is every bit as dark and comic as Orton's work. Yet at the centre of it are two dynamite performances. As Kenneth Halliwell, we have Alfred Molina, absolutely at the top of his game, playing somebody who sinks further and further into neurosis, who is gradually eclipsed by the person who he nurtures and who somehow achieves the success which he never achieved. And then as Orton himself, Gary Oldman, hot from the success of Sid and Nancy, in which he brilliantly played Sid Vicious. And I think one of his best performances. He's cheeky, he's sexy, he's funny, he's charming, he's dangerous. He is everything that you want a screen embodiment of Joe Orton to be. I remember going to see Prick Up Your Ears when it first came out in the 1980s and not knowing much about Joe Orton at all. I think I'd seen a couple of his plays. In fact, Adam Ant, the pop star, starred in a version of Entertaining Mr. Sloane at a theatre in Manchester, which I saw when I was up there in the 1980s. I think it was the first time I'd ever seen an Orton. And I loved the film. I thought it was really dark and funny and comic and savage and satirical, and it did exactly that thing that Orton always wanted to do, which was to unpick society from the inside. There are great supporting performances with Vanessa Redgrave's in. There's also, look out for a cameo by Derek Jarman. If you have seen Prick Up Your Ears before, it is worth going to see it again on the big screen. It's directed by Stephen Frears, who went on to direct Dirty Pretty Things and Philomena, and it still remains, I think, one of his best works. If you haven't seen it, you're in for a real treat. It's a film which is important historically and tells an important story, but it does so in a way which is really delightfully dark and deliciously subversive. I think Orton himself would have loved it.
Smashing.